What happens when a beloved Hollywood icon walks onto a daytime talk show expecting charm and applause, and instead finds himself locked in a quiet, razor-sharp verbal duel that no one in the room sees coming? Before we go any further, if you love explosive celebrity moments, unseen tension, and dramatic breakdowns that unfold right in front of the cameras, make sure you subscribe to Stage View right now, hit like, and drop a comment telling us what you think is about to happen, because this one escalates fast. The studio lights were warm, almost comforting, the kind designed to make everything feel safe. Laughter lingered in the air even before the cameras officially rolled, the audience buzzing with that familiar daytime energy. Applause on cue, smiles on command, a promise of light conversation and harmless jokes. The View had always sold itself as controlled chaos. Different opinions, sharp tongues, but never enough to truly cut. Jeff Goldblum stepped out from behind the curtain with his trademark half-smile, that slightly tilted posture that made him look like he was constantly mid-thought, mid-joke, mid-mystery. The audience erupted. They always did. To them, he wasn't just an actor. He was a vibe. A walking contradiction of intellect and eccentricity, of humor and quiet depth. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair as he approached the table, her smile wide, practiced, effortless. She'd done this thousands of times. She knew how to welcome a guest, how to disarm them, how to guide the conversation exactly where she wanted it to go. Or so she thought. Jeff took his seat, adjusted his jacket, glanced around the table like a curious professor stepping into a familiar classroom that somehow felt different today. His eyes flicked briefly to Joy, then to Whoopi, then to the audience again. Something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not discomfort, but awareness. The cameras went live. "Welcome back," Whoopi began, the rhythm of her voice anchoring the room. "We're here with the one and only Jeff Goldblum." Applause thundered again. Jeff nodded, hands raised slightly in mock surrender. "Oh my goodness," he said, voice smooth, playful. "I feel like I've already won something." Laughter rippled across the studio. Joy leaned forward. "You kind of have," she said. "You've won over pretty much everyone." Jeff smiled at her. "Well, that's very generous of you." And for a brief moment, everything was exactly as expected. They talked about his latest project. A few anecdotes. A joke about his jazz band. The audience laughed at all the right places. Jeff leaned into the charm, but there was a precision to his words that suggested he was listening more than he was speaking. Then Joy tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to signal a shift. "So," she said casually, tapping her pen against the desk, "you've always struck people as unconventional." Jeff raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a compliment." "Oh, it is," Joy replied quickly. "But people also say you're evasive. You never quite give a straight answer." The audience chuckled. Jeff chuckled too, but softer. "Do they?" he asked. "I always thought I gave thoughtful answers." Joy smiled wider. "Thoughtful, sure. But sometimes people just want a yes or no." Jeff leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. "Yes and no are very powerful words," he said gently. "They tend to flatten the truth." There was a pause. A small one, almost invisible. But the energy shifted. Joy laughed, waving her hand. "Oh, come on, Jeff. We're not talking philosophy here." Jeff's eyes stayed on her. "Aren't we always?" The audience laughed again, but this time it was mixed, some amused, some uncertain. Joy's smile tightened. "All right then, let's try this. You've been outspoken about certain social issues. Do you think celebrities should stay out of politics?" There it was. Jeff inhaled slowly. "I think people should stay human." Joy blinked. "That's not an answer." Jeff nodded. "It's the only one I trust." A murmur spread through the audience. Whoopi shifted slightly in her chair, sensing the undercurrent. Joy leaned in. "But don't you think when celebrities speak out, they influence people who might not know better?" Jeff's tone remained calm. "I think influence exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Silence can be persuasive too." Joy's pen stopped tapping. "So you don't see a problem with actors lecturing the public?" she pressed. Jeff smiled again, but this time it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I see a problem with anyone assuming the public can't think for themselves." The audience reacted instantly, gasps, scattered applause, a few nervous laughs. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. "Wow, that's a little condescending, don't you think?" Jeff tilted his head. "To whom?" "To the hosts of this show, for starters," she shot back. A hush fell over the studio. Jeff didn't rush to respond. He looked out at the audience, then back at Joy. "I don't think you need defending," he said. "You're doing just fine." The tension was no longer subtle. It sat heavy between them, like a third person at the table. Whoopi cleared her throat. Okay, let's. But Joy wasn't done. You know, she said, voice sharper now. Sometimes people hide behind intellect to avoid accountability. Jeff nodded slowly. And sometimes people mistake curiosity for avoidance. The audience reacted louder this time. Applause. Gasps. Someone in the front row whispered, "Oh." Joy's jaw tightened. "Are you saying I'm not curious?" "I'm saying," Jeff replied softly, "that curiosity asks. It doesn't corner." That line landed hard. For the first time, Joy hesitated. The cameras zoomed in slightly, catching the micro-expressions, the flicker of irritation, the recalibration. "Well," she said, forcing a laugh, "this is getting dramatic." Jeff smiled faintly. Drama is honesty wearing makeup. The audience erupted. Applause rolled through the studio, louder than before, drowning out the host's attempt to redirect. Joy leaned closer to the microphone. "You came here to promote a movie, Jeff. Not to psychoanalyze us." Jeff leaned in too, mirroring her posture. "I came here to talk," he said. "Conversation has a way of revealing more than we plan." The air felt electric now. Even the other hosts stayed quiet, watching the exchange unfold like a live wire stretching tighter by the second. Joy exhaled through her nose. "You're enjoying this." Jeff's voice was almost a whisper. "I'm respecting it." And in that moment, it was clear. This was no longer an interview. It was a standoff. And it was only just beginning. The applause faded unevenly, like rain tapering off after a sudden storm, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence that felt heavier than any noise. Jeff Goldblum remained still, hands folded, posture relaxed but alert, like a chess player who had just sacrificed a piece on purpose. Joy Behar shifted in her chair, her smile now more reflex than warmth, the kind you wear when you refuse to give the moment what it wants. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the audience leaning forward in their seats. Daytime television wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to hum with tension, with something unscripted and slightly dangerous. "So," Whoopi said carefully, attempting to reset the tone, "let's take a breath." Jeff nodded politely. Joy didn't. "You know," Joy said, turning slightly toward the audience as if recruiting them, "I've been doing this show a long time. I've interviewed presidents, comedians, activists. And usually people come in knowing the rules." Jeff's eyes stayed on her. "Rules can be useful," he said, "until they replace listening." A few people in the audience clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't a monologue anymore. It was a live negotiation of power. Joy laughed sharply. "You're very good with words." Jeff smiled. "They've been very patient with me." Joy leaned forward again. "But words can also be a way to dodge. You keep reframing, philosophizing. It's almost like you don't want to be pinned down." Jeff's fingers interlaced more tightly, though his voice stayed calm. "Pinned down by whom?" "By reality," Joy replied. Jeff blinked once. "Reality moves," he said. "Pins don't." The audience reaction was immediate, an audible oof, followed by scattered applause that grew louder when Jeff didn't follow it with a joke. He let the line hang, trusting it to do its own work. Joy's expression hardened. "That sounds nice," she said. "But people watching at home don't want riddles. They want clarity." Jeff leaned slightly toward the camera now, as if aware of those viewers. "Clarity doesn't come from being simplified," he said. "It comes from being honest about complexity." Joy scoffed. "That's very convenient for someone who never has to give a straight answer." For the first time, Jeff's smile disappeared entirely. "I've given straight answers my whole life," he said quietly. "They just didn't always point where people expected." The room went still. Even the audience seemed to sense they were watching something peel open. Joy's voice dropped. "Are you implying we're pushing you somewhere?" Jeff met her gaze. "I'm implying that pressure reveals intention." A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. One woman shook her head. Another nodded vigorously. The division was visible now, even without words. Whoopi tried again. "Okay, let him finish," Joy said abruptly, eyes never leaving Jeff. Jeff exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said. "Here's the thing. When someone asks a question, the shape of it matters. Some questions invite answers. Others demand obedience." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Obedience? On a talk show?" Jeff nodded. "Tone matters. Framing matters. And when curiosity turns into expectation, conversation turns into performance." The audience reacted louder than before, applause, gasps, whispers. Somewhere off camera, A producer's hand hovered nervously near a headset. Joy leaned back, crossing her legs this time, adopting a posture that signaled authority. You're saying we're performing? Jeff shrugged slightly. We're all performing. The difference is whether we're aware of it. Joy smiled thinly. You're very aware, apparently. Jeff smiled back, just as thin. Awareness is a survival skill. That line landed like a quiet threat, though it was delivered without malice. Joy's eyes flicked briefly to Whoopi, then back to Jeff. You know, Joy said, there's a fine line between intelligence and arrogance. Jeff nodded. There is, and it's usually drawn by whoever feels challenged. A sharp intake of breath echoed from the audience. Someone clapped once, too loudly, too early, then stopped. Joy laughed, but it sounded hollow. So now I'm challenged. Jeff's voice softened. No, you're engaged. The camera cut to the audience, catching faces wide-eyed, mouths half open. This wasn't comfortable television. This was collision. Joy leaned forward again. Let me ask you something plainly, she said. Do you think people like you, Hollywood elites, are out of touch with regular Americans? Jeff paused longer this time. Long enough that the silence became part of the answer. I think the phrase people like you does a lot of heavy lifting, he said. Joy's eyes narrowed. It's a fair question. It's a loaded one, Jeff replied. And loaded questions tend to explode. The audience laughed nervously. Joy's tone sharpened. You're avoiding again. Jeff shook his head slowly. I'm refusing to accept the premise. That sentence changed everything. Whoopi straightened. Sonny Hostin glanced at Joy, then at Jeff, sensing the gravity of what had just been said. Refusing the premise wasn't just disagreement. It was a rejection of the rules of the exchange. Joy leaned back, lips pressed together. You know, not everyone has the luxury of refusing premises. Jeff's voice dropped, sincere now. That's exactly why I do. A wave of applause broke out, stronger, more divided. Half the audience clapped enthusiastically. The other half sat frozen. Joy gestured toward the crowd. See, you've got them eating out of your hand. Jeff looked out at them, then back to her. I'm not feeding them, he said. I'm trusting them. Joy's laugh was sharper this time. You really think you're doing something noble here? Jeff tilted his head. I think I'm being present. Joy leaned in, voice low. You think I'm not? Jeff met her gaze. I think you're defending something. Joy's eyes flashed. Defending what? Jeff didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the desk, at the mugs, at the cards with bullet points that no longer mattered. Then he looked up. Control, he said. The studio erupted. Gasps turned into applause into a roar that drowned out everything else. Whoopi raised her hands, trying to calm the room, but even she looked stunned. Joy sat frozen, her face unreadable for a split second before she forced a smile. Wow, she said. That's quite an accusation. Jeff's voice was gentle. It's an observation. Joy shook her head. You come onto my show. Our show, Whoopi corrected quietly. Joy waved her off. And you psychoanalyze me in front of millions of people? Jeff shook his head. I responded to you. Joy leaned forward, voice trembling now, not with fear, but with anger. You know what this is? This is mansplaining wrapped in a velvet voice. The audience reacted instantly. Some cheers, some boos, a sharp divide slicing through the room. Jeff didn't flinch. He nodded slowly. If that's how it landed, I'm listening. Joy blinked. That wasn't the reaction she expected. You're listening? She repeated. Yes, Jeff said. Are you? The question hung there, raw and exposed. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the segment began, she didn't immediately fire back. Whoopi seized the moment. All right, she said firmly. We're going to take a quick break. The audience noise swelled, some disappointed, some relieved. The cameras pulled back as the music started, but the tension didn't fade. It clung to the air, buzzing between the chairs, between the glances, between what had been said and what was still coming. As the cameras cut, Jeff leaned back, exhaling slowly. Joy stared straight ahead, jaw set, hands clenched just out of view. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. The lights dimmed just enough to signal the break, but the tension didn't dim with them. If anything, it thickened. The audience buzzed in low, hushed tones, people leaning toward each other, whispering, pointing subtly toward the table as if afraid the moment might hear them talking about it. Producers hovered at the edges of the set, headsets pressed tight, eyes darting between Jeff Goldblum and Joy Behar like referees who knew the next round could turn ugly. Jeff sat back in his chair, hands resting loosely on his knees, staring not at his phone, not at the floor, but somewhere beyond the studio lights. He looked calm, almost meditative, but inside there was a quiet alertness, the kind that comes when you know the room has shifted and there's no going back. He wasn't rehearsing comebacks. He wasn't strategizing. He was listening, to the silence, to the weight of what had already been said. Joy, on the other hand, didn't move. Her shoulders were stiff, her gaze locked straight ahead. The smile was gone now. This wasn't television Joy. This was the Joy who felt challenged in her own house. She tapped her fingers once on the desk, then stopped, as if realizing even that small gesture might be caught on camera. A producer leaned in, voice low. "We're coming back hot," he said. "Let's steer it back to the movie." Joy nodded without looking at him. Jeff glanced up. "I'm happy to talk about the film," he said gently. Joy finally turned to him. "That would be nice," she replied, the edge unmistakable. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. The lights snapped back to full brightness. The applause cue flashed. The audience clapped, louder than necessary, trying to release the tension through sound. The cameras rolled in close again, hungry. "We're back," Whoopi announced, her voice steady but serious. "All right, let's take a breath." Joy smiled at the camera, professional again, but there was something brittle in it. "Jeff, you have a new movie coming out," she said quickly. "Tell us about that." Jeff nodded. "It's a story about transformation," he began. "About?" Joy cut in. Briefly. The interruption was small, but it landed hard. Jeff paused, then smiled politely. "Briefly," he echoed. "It's about a man who believes he understands the system, until the system shows him it understands him better." A few audience members chuckled nervously. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Joy nodded. "Sounds timely." Jeff tilted his head. "Stories often are." The exchange was civil on the surface, but underneath it, everything crackled. Joy flipped a card on the desk, scanning it quickly. "You play a powerful figure," she said. "Someone with influence." Jeff nodded. "Influence is an interesting word." Joy's eyes flicked up. "Is it?" "Yes," Jeff said. "Because it implies direction. But influence can also be gravity. You don't push. You pull." Joy exhaled sharply through her nose. "You really can't help yourself." Jeff smiled faintly. "I could say the same." The audience reacted again, half laughter, half shock. Joy leaned forward, abandoning the cards. "Let me be clear," she said. "This is not a philosophy class. This is a talk show." Jeff's gaze softened. "And talk shows," he said, "are conversations." Joy shook her head. "No, they're interviews." Jeff nodded slowly. "That explains a lot." A collective "oh" swept through the audience. Whoopi raised a hand. "Okay, let's not." Joy ignored her. "You think because you're calm, because you use pretty language, you're above this." Jeff's voice dropped. "I don't think I'm above anything." Joy leaned closer, voice tight. "Then stop talking down to me." Jeff met her gaze, unblinking. "I'm not talking down," he said. "I'm talking across." The room felt like it was holding its breath. Joy laughed suddenly, loudly. "Across? You're sitting at my table." Jeff nodded. "So are you." That was it. Joy straightened, her voice rising. "You know what your problem is, Jeff? You think being enigmatic makes you untouchable." The audience gasped. Jeff didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He waited until she finished. "Does it?" he asked. Joy blinked. "Does it what?" "Make me untouchable," Jeff said. Joy scoffed. "You've dodged every real question today." Jeff leaned in slightly. "You've framed every question as a verdict." The audience erupted again, applause crashing against the walls of the studio. Even Whoopi couldn't hide her reaction now, eyes widening slightly. Joy shook her head, incredulous. "Wow, you really came in ready to fight." Jeff's tone was calm, almost sad. "I came in ready to listen." Joy slammed her hand lightly on the desk. "No, you came in ready to teach." Silence. Jeff inhaled. "Teaching requires consent," he said. "I've been responding." Joy's voice trembled now, the emotion breaking through the professionalism. "You're twisting this." Jeff's eyes softened further. "I think you're feeling exposed." The audience reacted instantly, some cheering, others audibly protesting. The division was complete now. This was no longer entertainment, it was allegiance. Joy stared at him, stunned. "How dare you?" Jeff nodded slowly. "That's fair." That response disarmed the room. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes flicked to the camera, then back to Jeff. "You don't get to analyze me on my own show." Jeff leaned back, hands open. "Then stop analyzing me." A beat. Then another. The silence stretched so long it became uncomfortable. Even the audience didn't know how to react. Whoopi finally spoke, her voice firm. Okay, that's enough. Joy turned to her. No, it's not. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Yes, it is. Joy turned back to Jeff, one last time. You think you've won something here. Jeff shook his head. There's nothing to win. Joy laughed bitterly. Then why does it feel like you're enjoying this? Jeff looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time his voice wavered. Because honesty is relieving, he said. Even when it's uncomfortable. The room fell quiet. Not tense. Not explosive. Quiet in a way that felt heavy, reflective. Joy leaned back slowly, crossing her arms again, but this time it looked like armor. Well, she said, forcing a smile. We're almost out of time. Jeff nodded. Time always shows up when it's needed. Whoopi glanced at the clock, then at the audience, then back at the table. We're going to wrap this up. The applause cue flashed again, but it was weak this time, confused. As the segment ended, the camera pulled back, catching Joy's tight smile, Jeff's thoughtful expression, and the audience still buzzing, unsure of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't going to end when the cameras cut. It was only about to explode. The moment the cameras cut for the final time, the studio didn't relax. It fractured. Applause sputtered out, replaced by a low roar of voices colliding at once. Audience members stood, some clapping hard, others shaking their heads, a few arguing openly with strangers seated beside them. Phones were already out. Clips were already being recorded, thumbs moving fast, captions forming in real time. Whatever had just happened wasn't staying inside that studio. Joy Behar pushed her chair back slightly, lips pressed into a thin line. The smile she'd worn for the cameras vanished the second the red light went dark. She didn't look at Jeff. She didn't look at Whoopi. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, like someone holding back words that might shatter something if released. Jeff Goldblum remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. He exhaled slowly, shoulders rising and falling, as if he'd just stepped out of deep water. When he finally stood, he adjusted his jacket out of habit, not nerves. His expression wasn't victorious. It wasn't smug. It was contemplative. Heavy. A producer rushed in, voice hushed but urgent. Okay, let's clear the floor. Joy stood abruptly. Unbelievable, she muttered, not quite under her breath. Jeff turned toward her, calm even now. Joy! She cut him off without looking at him. Save it. That was it. No final word. No reconciliation. She walked off set, heels sharp against the floor, each step echoing louder than the applause ever had. Behind the scenes, staff members whispered in clusters. One shook his head. That went off the rails. Another replied, No, that went viral. Jeff was escorted toward the exit, but not before a few audience members called out to him. Tell them the truth, one voice shouted. You were respectful, another yelled. Someone else booed. Jeff paused, turning back once, offering a small nod. Not to one person, but to the moment itself. Then he disappeared behind the curtain. Within minutes, the internet detonated. Clips flooded social media, cropped and captioned with surgical precision. Jeff Goldblum silences Joy Behar on live TV. Joy Behar unleashed after tense clash. The View goes off script. Every platform told a different story, depending on who was watching. Comment sections became battlegrounds. He was calm. She was defensive. No, he was condescending. She lost control. He exposed the format. She stood her ground. He talked circles. She couldn't handle being challenged. Media outlets scrambled to contextualize it. Morning headlines framed it as a misunderstanding. Afternoon segments called it a confrontation. By evening, it was a culture war. Inside the View offices, emergency meetings were held. Producers replayed the footage over and over, dissecting every pause, every interruption, every glance. Was it too far? Was it perfect television? Both questions hung unanswered. Joy Behar broke her silence first, not on the show, but online. Lively debate is what we do, she posted. But respect goes both ways. The comments flooded in instantly. Supporters praised her strength. Critics accused her of deflecting. Jeff didn't post anything. That silence spoke louder than any statement. Late-night hosts joked about it. Pundits analyzed body language frame by frame. Psychologists were invited on air to speculate about power dynamics. Everyone had an angle. Everyone had an opinion. But those who had been in the room knew the truth was quieter and sharper than the headlines. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about losing. It was about control slipping for just a moment, and what happens when it does. Days later, when Jeff was asked about the incident at a premiere, he paused before answering. "I think conversations reveal more than we intend," he said softly. "That's not always a bad thing." Joy addressed it on the show a week later, composed, professional. "Sometimes guests forget where they are," she said, looking straight into the camera. The audience applauded, but the applause didn't erase the memory, because viewers remembered the pause, the silence, the question that never got answered. And somewhere between those moments, something cracked open, and people felt it. Now it's your turn. What do you think really happened in that room? Was it a calm dismantling or a subtle provocation? Who crossed the line, or did anyone? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let the conversation continue. And if you want more explosive, cinematic, behind-the-scenes celebrity moments like this, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and share this story with someone who loves real, unfiltered drama. Because sometimes the most shocking moments don't come from shouting. They come from staying quiet long enough for the truth to echo.